Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue watching Colt on 90 Day Fiancé, The Single Life. Let's watch.
Probably a year or two, 5, who knows?
Oh, a year or two?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so how's it been?
It's good. I mean, he's very transparent now. He gave me passwords to absolutely everything, even like Groupon and stuff. So
All right, so that's interesting. The two of them are working on trust so that Vanessa can trust Colt. And one of the things that they decided together, I'm guessing, is for Colt to give up all of his passwords, all of his, access to all of his accounts or whatever. And this helps Vanessa to feel that she can trust him. And this is something that I will do with couples as they are recovering from infidelity. Even though Colt hasn't really cheated on Vanessa, he has cheated on people with Vanessa. And Vanessa thus has understandable distrust of him. And to alleviate some of that distrust, it's sometimes a good idea. It's not always what people will decide to do, but I will work with couples as they're recovering from infidelity that the cheater will provide all that access. Because if you're not cheating, then what's the big deal? But the downside of that is you will have a hard time having any kind of private conversation, even if you were talking about, because sometimes there are things that you keep from your spouse, or someone is communicating with you about secrets that they have, and so at least Colt can't do that on those accounts that he shared with her. But it is a fairly effective way of helping people to trust again, because for the Vanessas of the world, they're sitting there going, is he cheating? What's he doing? Oh, he's on his phone. Is this the beginning of cheating? And if you have access to all those accounts, sometimes all you just need is access. People won't even look into it. They'll just be like, well, he wouldn't put stuff in there if he wasn't doing anything bad because he knows that I have access to that. So sometimes it's just having the passwords that can help people to feel okay and to relax and to be able to go through the day without having those intrusive thoughts.
I trust him right now.
A 100% trust? Because you have always said that was the main thing with Colt, that you could not trust him. Do you believe that today you can trust him 100%?
90%. I still have a little bit of doubt here and there.
Right, so that's rational. It would be strange for Vanessa to have 100% trust in him, particularly because he's cheated in the past, and the relationship is also fairly new. They haven't been together for very long, at least from what I understand. So it would be normal and rational to have a bit of uncertainty about it, and that's okay. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm not entirely sure. And really, none of us are entirely sure about our spouses. We build trust over time. There's a track record that builds up over time. And we can always we can approach extremely sure not extremely sure. We can approach like 99% certainty, but we can never really be 100% certain. And that's just part of the bummer and the magic of love, I suppose. But she's at 90%, and we saw Colt's reaction. He was okay with that. He was, okay, 90%. Sounded his body language, it seemed that he could live with that, which shows differentiation, shows that he's flexible, shows, at least in this relationship, shows that he's able to say, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Because we've seen other people on this show where people in Colt's position would say, I never cheated on you. Like, why are you paranoid? And really laying into her about that. And from what we've seen on the show, he hasn't done that. Now, maybe behind the scenes he has. But Vanessa hasn't really indicated that at all, which is interesting. From the very beginning, or about midway through this season of The Single Life, I have been marveling at how different Colt comes across when he is in a relationship with Vanessa as opposed to Jess and with Larissa.
I feel like you just don't enjoy sex, honestly.
I feel like 3 hours for fucking sex is ridiculous. Like, fucking, come on, let's go. Sometimes, yeah, I'm turned on and you just keep fucking going and going, like, stories, just keep talking. And I'm like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it's pretty rough to watch the first time, and we're watching it again. It's like, okay, Vanessa, you have a preference. That's totally fine. You don't want to do those things. Totally fine. Makes sense. I think a lot of people would be in your camp on that, but a lot of people wouldn't. But how do you communicate about that? How do you say, you know what, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, I like this, but I don't like that. How do you say that without being just completely I mean, I'm just going to say it, verbally abusive. I mean, shut the F up. He's trying to express his sexuality with her. Now, if he's imposing on her and forcing her and pressuring her, then that would justify pushback, of course. But we're not hearing that. So if there is no real justifiable reason why she is talking to him like that, I'm just going to call it what it is. It's not okay. When someone has a sexual preference, regardless of what it is, and they're just saying, hey, I would like to do this, and you don't want to do it, just say, I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. I respect that you want to do that, but I don't want to do that. Or the way we had sex last night, how it was 3 hours long, I'm not into that kind of thing. I see that you're into that kind of thing, and I'm sorry. Now, I'm pretty sure, based on just intuition and also her statements later, Vanessa is coming out strong right now because she feels like she isn't good enough for him. I think she has some insecurities, which a lot of people have. And she's worried that she's not good enough. She's not enough of a sexual person for him. And she is worried she's going to lose him. And instead of speaking from that differentiated place, she just attacks him and says, there's something wrong with you, which is, we have enough of that going on in the world, particularly in the realm of sexuality.
Yes, but I don't know if he's willing to compromise. So I feel like that could be a huge issue between us. If you're truly unhappy with your sex life and that's like a big fucking deal for you, I don't want you to be with me.
Oh my God.
Now, on the other hand, for Vanessa to say, look, if this is a huge deal breaker for you, then I don't think this is going to work out. And I think Vanessa is saying that as well, which is totally rational. I think she's giving Colt a choice of, look, either you compromise with me or even adjust a little bit to my preference sexually, meaning less frequent and shorter, sessions, or I don't think this is going to work, because if you're that intense about that and it means that much to you, then I'm sorry, because I'm only going to go so far with this. In fact, how far I've already gone is already kind of bothering me. And so what do you think? And it seems, based on what we saw on the show, that Colt might have actually taken that to heart and said, okay, I guess I have to adjust on that. She has made it really fairly clear that she doesn't want to go that far. And if I want to keep this relationship going, which I do, then I'm going to have to adjust, which seems to have happened. Let's watch.
Which quickly turns me off. It's just like, just rambles on forever.
Sorry, I'll shut the fuck up next time.
I've told you that a few times and you still do it.
What is he saying when he's talking so much?
He always has to have a whole story. I don't understand why.
Again, we have enough sex negativity in our culture. We don't need more of it. So if, Vanessa, you don't want it, totally fine. Absolutely. If you're just like, yeah, I'm just not into that. He's into that. He's into this thing. He likes to talk a lot during sex. I don't want to talk a lot. I don't want to hear a lot of talking during sex. We have differences. That's okay. We're both okay. This ridicule is just an example of how we kink shame in this society, how we sex shame in this society. And Vanessa, I think, knows that people watching the show and the fellow cast members, in this panel will join in ridiculing Colt. Now, Colt seems to be taking it in stride, but what about all the people watching who might have a similar kink as Colt? And that's usually what I'm concerned about. We need to stop kink shaming people. It's fine. Consensual, Colt wants to do something consensual. He's not hurting anyone. He has a preference. Vanessa doesn't want to do that. Totally fine. How do they communicate about that? How do they work something out? How do they listen to each other? Ridicule, though, that's just not fair.
You dressed up for Kelly, right?
Yeah.
Well, that would never happen with Vanessa.
But the thing is, Colt is never satisfied. I mean, he complained about Jess, too. He always has a complaint about everybody, so it's not just me.
True. So, yeah, I have problems, too. I think I need a lot, and I've realized that I need more than probably I'll ever get in life.
Okay, so it sounds like he's realizing, okay, I have this huge desire, and it sounds like I'm probably never going to be able to get that, because to find someone that is compatible with me in all these other ways, it's not likely they're going to be compatible with me in this way, in sex frequency. And so I guess I'm kind of realizing that I'm not going to be able to get that. And that's something that some people will grieve. It's a grief process for some people. You're 5 years into a marriage and you realize, this is not the sexual life that I wanted to have, or this isn't the intellectual conversation life that I wanted to have, or this person doesn't want to travel as much as I want to travel, or this person parents differently than I do, or something. And you try to change and it doesn't work out. And sometimes you just have to grieve that loss of a future that you thought was going to happen. And you just say, okay, that sucks and I'm hurt, and that, it's kind of painful, but it's necessary because you have to be realistic in life and you can't get everything you want in life. Like there's going to be some compromises. There's going to be, taking the good with the bad. So it sounds like Colt is doing that. Now, whenever I talk, positive about Colt, I'm always terrified that the internet's going to hate me because they hate Colt. So you're free to hate Colt, but I use these shows as a way of talking about things so that we can all learn and benefit from, not necessarily to approve or disapprove of the cast members.
As the other day, I hopped in the shower with you. I started giving you a blowjob, and then later on, you're still like, I just didn't feel like you had the right energy for it.
Oh. Wait, he didn't like it?
I'm like, what the fuck do you want from me?
Okay, again, a totally worthy conversation to have in a different tone. So it sounds like she did a sexual act with him to please him, presumably, and he didn't like it. That's okay. She experimented with something, he didn't like it, or didn't like the way it was done, or the timing, or whatever. That's okay. Sex is complicated, and for some couples, they struggle with vibe, if you will. There's a energy or a vibe that has to be in place in order for both people to feel comfortable, for both people to feel safe, and to feel in the zone, if you will. There's optimally, when people are having sex, they're not so much in their head. They're not thinking about things. They're not worried about things. They're not overly concerned about bothering the other person. Things are flowing well. It's like a dance, right? You're dancing a ballroom dance or some kind of dance together, and you're just in sync. And there's not a lot of thinking, and you can be in your body, and you can be relaxed, and you can trust, and you can explore, and you can do things. But there's a lot of potential barriers to that, right? If you are not into what's happening right now, if you're in a bad mood, if you're hurt about something that happened earlier, or scared of something that's happening right now, you're scared of performing, or there's a lot of barriers that can get in the way of that energy and that vibe. And if I was to take a guess based on what Vanessa and Colt are talking about, that for Colt, I'm guessing Vanessa as well, but at least for Colt, that sometimes these internal barriers are preventing him from getting into the flow of it, and he doesn't know how to talk about it, or at least the two of them don't have a routine about how to talk about that. What often happens, and it seems to happen for Vanessa, is she said, you know what, okay, so if I was to take a guess, because I've seen this a lot, is that Vanessa, as the lower libido person, and also someone that's worried about him leaving her, that she is frequently thinking, okay, how can I get my sexuality going so that I can be all that he needs me to be so that he won't cheat on me and leave me? Okay, it's kind of a rational thought, but a lot of people in Vanessa's shoes will actually exaggerate that based on their own attachment injuries from the past, preoccupied attachment, that kind of thing. And so she's frequently worried about that, which isn't a good place to be in, by the way. If you are having sex because you're afraid of something, then that obviously is going to interfere with your enjoyment of sex, which actually will interfere with your partner's enjoyment of sex, because your partner wants you to enjoy and does not want you to be doing things out of obligation and does not want you to be doing things out of fear, right? So that whole thing needs to be addressed up front, of like, we need to get rid of that fear. We need to get rid of that obligation up front. And that can be pretty complicated. Sex therapy, talking about sex in couples therapy is extremely complex. I have worked with couples on this for years, and there's so much to unpack. Anyway, so I'm guessing that's where Vanessa's coming from. And she's like, okay, what can I do? And maybe she even read online. It's like, oh, if you do this sexual act while he's in the shower, it'll spice up your marriage. And it's, not necessarily a terrible idea, but it's a new behavior that she's introducing. And so she does that. And then for whatever reason, he gets tripped up in this situation, and he's like, what's happening right now? and it's harder for me to get into it in this context. Does she really want to do this right now? Because this feels kind of mechanical. I mean, who knows? There's just a lot of different things that could get into Colt's mind that could trip up the vibe aspect of the, sexual session, if you will. And then for Colt, the brakes get put on, and he's like, something about this isn't feeling right, and I don't know what to do. And then later on, Colt says, there's something about that whole thing I didn't like. But because he's probably terrified of hurting her, he doesn't know what to say. And then she gets really hurt by that. She's like, what do you want? And you could imagine being in Vanessa's shoes. She's like, you want sex all the time. I got enough motivation up to do this for you. And then you have this sexist notion that men are supposed to want sex all the time in any certain way. There's this idea out there that men are just, walking erections. And certainly, some people are, regardless of gender. But men need to be wine and dined as well, if you will. Men can feel afraid during sex. Men can feel hurt. Men need often attachment security. They need to feel as though everything is okay. And a lot of men that I talk with in my practice will suffer from sexual issues because they shame themselves for that. And when they communicate to their partner, they will be shamed for not being a real man and saying that they need things to be kind of particular and they need emotional stability and emotional safety during sex. So anyway, so he can't communicate that to her. And then he's just like, I just didn't like, there's something about that I didn't like. Maybe even it blames her a little bit because he doesn't know what to say, which isn't okay. And then she says, okay, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm trying, and you don't like that. And, what man wouldn't like that sort of thing? And I throw my hands up, I give up. So I'm guessing that's what's happening. It's a common dynamic that if they were in couples therapy, they could work on it.
Okay, first off, she's never done anything like that before. And then it's just all of a sudden, I think we're having like a fight, and then she just comes in and starts doing it. I'm like, this is odd.
Baby, I just wanted to suck your dick.
So he's saying that they just had a fight, and then she decided to do this thing in the shower. I'm guessing it's because she was trying to alleviate the stress between the relationship. Not necessarily a bad move, but maybe if she had connected with him emotionally a little bit before. I mean, who knows? There's really no way for me to know. The couples that I've worked with, it can be very particular, but it has to do with emotional safety. It has to do with, those barriers to the vibe of the sexuality in the moment. And so he's saying it was weird. We were having a fight. I take a shower. All of a sudden, she's in the shower with me, and I didn't know what's happening. And then she's saying, well, maybe I just want, the way that they're talking about it is extremely concerning to me because it doesn't lend itself towards any kind of understanding each other, which is incredibly important when it comes to these issues.
I don't need stories. I don't need sex 100 times a day. I'm just saying you and I have different levels of energy.
Kelly, it seems like you're seeing some red flags here.
So, okay, he says that we have different levels of energy. Now, based on his previous statements earlier in the season, I'm guessing what he means by that is when we have sex, it just doesn't feel quite right. In fact, it feels like you don't really want to have sex. He even said that in the car when they were talking about it. He's like, yeah, I feel like you don't like sex. I get this impression like you don't like sex. When I'm having sex, I'm into it. I like it. But I get this impression like you're just kind of doing it because you feel like you have to. I'm guessing that's what he means by different energies. And that's also possible. Some people actually, there's asexual people, there's demisexual people, they don't want to have sex. Or they're generally not interested in having sex. And so there are people, there's a spectrum there. Or maybe she is not asexual or demisexual and she does want to have sex, but she's never been able to enjoy sex with anyone because of sexism and misogyny and abuse that she has experienced in her life. I've talked with many women about this issue. I'll ask them something like, have you ever enjoyed a sexual encounter with someone? And they will, at the age of 45, and they'll say like, no, never. I've always wanted to enjoy it, but I've never fully, or another question that I'll ask is, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being extremely stressed out and 1 being like totally chill and relaxed as you could be, or just generally relaxed, have you ever, what's the lowest number you've ever been during a sexual encounter? And some people will say, oh, I've never been below like a 4. Like best case scenario, I'm a 4. That's pretty stressed out, right? And there are reasons for that. Sexual traumas, a lot of people, a lot of women, but really everyone, the high rates of, at least surprisingly high rates, I think, to the general public, of sexual traumas, of sexual shame, humiliation, mistreatment. And without any way of resolving that, and with the fear of having that happen again, obviously that's going to cause, as you head into an activity that you associate with terribleness, your distress is going to go up. When I go into the doctor and they are going to, stick me with a needle or something, my heart rate goes up. And if you consider sex to be threatening, at least potentially threatening to you, then your stress level is going to go up, and that is going to really, put the brakes on the revving up of the engine, if you will, if I'm mixing metaphors, in terms of your sexuality. And so maybe, again, I have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vanessa was like that, in that she, at least with Colt, has a hard time feeling comfortable enough just to be herself and to assert her own sexuality. She seems like she is reacting to his sexuality. She's like trying to please him. She's just, okay, what does he need? And she's never really in the zone for herself. She's never really saying, hey, I want to do this right now. It's more like, okay, I better get up the motivation because he needs to do this, because if I don't do this, he's going to leave me.
He has I don't know if he's a nymph, These are things you got to really get yourself checked out. Sex is sex addiction.
You think Colt has a sex addiction?
Yeah.
Okay, so sex addiction is a compulsion and it's real, in the same way that someone has a compulsion for smoking cigarettes or heroin use or gambling. You can have a compulsion regarding sex. Absolutely. There are some people who they're at work and they get a little bored and they can't leave their desk. And so they're like, oh, it's an itch that's going off their head. It's like, I have to, do something sexual right now. And so they go on the internet and, they do things on their own. And they get in trouble at work because, they do that enough times, they eventually get in trouble. Or they expose themselves to someone on accident and they harm someone. Or they are trying to fall asleep at night and they can't stop thinking about sex workers or something. And so they have to go online and they have to talk to them and they have to, it dominates their mind for a good portion of time, more times than not. And these people are real, same way that gambling. People will, there's a difference between gambling and having a mild problem and being a gambling addict or having a compulsive gambling problem. There's a difference between shopping a lot, maybe spending more money on clothes than you should, and having a shopping addiction or a spending addiction. My dog is barking. These things are, there's a difference. So there's a difference between someone who likes to have sex a lot and someone who has a sex addiction. I'm hearing nothing from Colt that indicates he has a sex addiction or a compulsion. Now, maybe he does because we just don't have that information. But just the fact that he wants to have sex a lot. And my theory about him, and I would have to ask him about this, is that he's actually desperately seeking attachment security. And because he has trouble with vulnerability and social awkwardness, I think, he will primarily try to connect through sex, when if he had a broader repertoire of how to connect with Vanessa and feel close to her and feel intimate with her and feel secure in their relationship, I'm guessing he would do those things and he wouldn't want to have sex all the time. Having said that, some people like to have sex 3 times a day and there's nothing wrong with that, and it doesn't mean someone's an addict. It'd be like saying if someone likes to, I don't know, what's another activity that people do? Go for a walk. You like to walk your dogs 3 times a day. You just get a joy out of it. You get to see the outdoors. You get to breathe the fresh air. You get some exercise in. If you walked the dogs 3 times a day, would you call yourself addicted to dog walking? No. Well, but it could be a compulsion. It'd be an odd compulsion, but it's just something you like to do, right? I make 2 YouTube reaction videos every day. Does that mean I'm addicted to making reaction videos? No. It just means it's something that I like to do. There's a difference between something you like to do and a compulsion. And a pretty big difference is, are you flexible around that? Is Colt flexible? Can he sustain himself and can he survive without much distress if he only has sex a certain amount of times a day? It seems like he can. So this label of sex addiction just being thrown around all the time has got to stop, because it's a real problem, but people just will label anyone who seems even slightly out of the ordinary. People will label cheaters, Tiger Woods is a sex addict. I don't know if he is or not, but the data that we had available to us back in the day was he had cheated on his wife a bunch of times. So it doesn't mean you're a sex addict. It could mean that, but it's actually kind of a rare condition. It's much more likely, given statistical likelihood, that someone just was cheating and they were making bad choices.
I've gone to therapy about that. My ex-wife went to a sex therapist.
And you said you have somewhat of a porn addiction?
I mean, I like to watch porn. I don't think it's an addiction.
Okay, so he went to therapy about it, and we're getting a little bit more detail, but nothing that indicates an addiction. Now, can someone who has an addiction or a compulsion be ashamed of it or be in denial of it and not want to share it? Yeah, absolutely. That could happen. So Colt could have it and deny it, but there's no data on this show that indicates, particularly to this other cast member, that would indicate a solid conceptualization of sex addiction.
That might be where he's coming from, Vanessa. I get that. I'm obviously working a lingerie store, and I have a lot of women that tell me a lot of stories behind the curtains. And there are a lot of things out there that some guys are more adventurous.
I feel like Vanessa holds herself back.
I don't know.
So we're just discovering what we need and what we want and who we want to be together.
That's a good attitude for Colt to have. We are discovering and we're figuring out how to be together, which is a good attitude, especially if he actually has that attitude ongoing. But he said something again earlier. He's like, I just don't think she likes sex that much. And, that could be possible. But more than likely, in my experience, what that indicates is that Vanessa has had a hard time, given sexism and misogyny and her past partners and possible sexual exploitation or harm, victimization in the past, that she just has never been in a relationship where she could actually explore herself sexually and explore what she wants, where sexuality can generate from within them. And this is something that I actually talk with a lot of clients about, is finding the sexuality inside of you and really exploring that. Let me use a parallel thing. Like, I will talk about people having a connection with themselves. Sometimes we call this a lack of self, and you can listen to all my episodes on lack of self or connection with the self. When you are denied the opportunity to know your emotions and to know who you are and know what you want early in life, if you don't have that mirroring and that attunement from your parents, then you could be 25, 35 years old and not know who you are, not know what you want, not really know what your goals are in life. You're just always reacting to what other people want for you or what other people expect of you. And that's very common, usually as a result of abuse or mistreatment or neglect growing up. And in therapy, I will talk with a lot of clients about how they can get in touch with that, because in order for individuals to be happy and to have well-being and meaning in their life, they have to know who they are and what they want. They have to know their needs. In order to know your needs, you have to know your emotions, because your emotions are always an indication of your needs. When you're upset, when you're angry, when you're happy, when you're jealous, all the emotions that are happening inside your body. And I'm pointing at the body because that's, the emotions are throughout the body. When we understand our emotions, then we understand our needs, and then we understand how to meet our needs. But if you don't know what your emotions are, or you aren't used to paying attention to them, then you're never really knowledgeable about what you need. And so you can never make yourself happy because you don't know what you need. And you can never tell other people how to make you happy because you don't even know how to make you happy. So a big part of therapy is helping people to get in touch with that. And you can listen to all my episodes on lack of self and connection to self if you want more information on that, because we talk about it quite a bit, particularly with Bob. And Similar to sexuality. If you don't know who you are, if you're not connected with your sexual urges and your sexual emotions, if you will, then you don't know what you need and you don't know how to assert it. You don't know how to say, this is what I want. Give me that sexual thing. I want to do this thing. You're just reacting to what other people want. And occasionally you are getting your needs met just by random circumstance, or if things are in a particular range of sexual activity, it's just sort of coincides with your own needs. But you really have to understand the full, or as best you can, the full range of your urges and your sexual life, your sexual personality, if you will. And so with clients, I will work with them, and it can take a long time getting in connection with that. And there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of like, okay, do I like this? Okay, let's try this out. But if you're going to do that with a partner, the partner has to be up for it. The partner has to be flexible and safe and willing to experiment and both people have to be willing to have things not go incredibly well. Because that's another misnomer, another misunderstanding that is really oppressive to people, is that sex is always supposed to be fantastic, fireworks all the time. For some couples it is, but it usually isn't. There's usually ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great, sometimes it's terrible. And you have to be able to be okay with that. You say, well, that was a waste of time, but next time we'll try it. Or what can we learn from that? And we don't want to judge ourselves, we don't want to judge other people. It's okay. So you need to have that extreme, safe, experimenting place in order to discover who you are sexually, so you can actually enact that and have the energy that your partner is actually looking for. Just looking at Vanessa and saying, I don't think she likes sex, doesn't really help. And also saying, you should like sex more, obviously won't help as well. And again, I want to point out that people who have this issue, lack of connection with their sexual identity, have that for a good reason. It's not because there's something wrong with them. It's because they have been shamed, they've been victimized, they were never allowed to explore that, maybe due to religious oppression or something. Anyway, let's watch.
Okay. So how many people are in the house?
3.
3 people in the house. You, Colt, and Miss Debbie, Colt's mom.
Yes.
Well, Debbie has been a part of every single relationship he has had so far.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.